but he had to, in order to have even the cantilever working with the spans that the Army Corps was requiring, they were saying that it had to have 200, that's right around the 200-foot opening between the 170 or 200 feet, let's say 200 feet, between the piers. And, but that was a long span for a single piece of steel. But the just a couple of years before that, they had designed open hearth forging. And I'm not an engineer, so I can tell you how it works, but it made harder, longer rails possible, and steel, period. So it was a breakthrough that actually enabled this great bridge to happen. And so you had a combination of the a railroad actually was coming from west to east, which is kind of odd in this country, from from Kansas City to Memphis to Birmingham, and then they would go on to the Gulf or to the Atlantic coast, because there was an immense amount of, as well as railroad building, railroad takeovers and railroad shuffling, you know, and so the names change, and they, instead of building a section of line, if you've got a company that's already owns a stretch of line, you can either lease it or buy it, which happened very frequently with the name changes that we see from time to time. So, as I said, the Army engineers required a very large opening and a 75-foot, given the normal water level, a 75-foot open space for the large steamboats to come down underneath. So that made it, the piers had to be higher, the steel had to be stronger and longer, and they, this has really nice views of them building the piers and this one, the second one down, shows this lattice work of supporting it, and so it must be a slightly different design and not as strong as the ones they have over the main part of the river, like the second one there, because it didn't require. Well, actually, I don't know whether you could even do it. This is coming from the land to do. And then they had the largest locomotive they could find to test the bridge initially, and of course it passed with flying colors because it's still operating with BNSF carrying, I think, 90 million pounds of cargo across it every year. It is a remarkable engineering and construction success. It's required a little work in the last year, but it's when it was built, as you probably know from the paper and so on, it was the first bridge south of St. Louis to the Gulf. It was the largest span bridge in the United States and the third largest in the world. So it was, not having had a bridge before, that was really a leap.
May I ask you something about
Sir?
the barging? Was that one single track for a barge? And I wonder how many cars they could get on it? Or were they side by side that they shipped?
You know, this is all the information I have, and so it would just be guessing for me to say. I would say maybe 10 cars at a time. It looks like if they could do side by side, it would actually, it would double the number, but then you'd have to
You have to shift it.
shift it, and shifting, if you're a little bit off, it's,
And the weight of
But
the
they
car
actually-
makes a difference in the ballast weight of the weight of the cars. If one weight is different than the other, would throw off the weight of the, so it's probably one per the, because you have to remember, they were still doing railroad crossings at Helena until 1961.
my gosh.
We didn't build a bridge at Helena until 1960, 1960.
Mhm.
And so they were still doing railroad crossings there by barge until 1960.
Well, this,
There's probably a
Fortunately.
single track then down the middle of the barge, and maybe a couple of cars per barge or something like that.
well, it would take forever then, 100 car train. But anyway, it was just such a change. I mean, it was like daylight and dark to go from, and it was not as dangerous. That was the dangerous transition, trying to load something. Also, if it's windy and choppy on the river, the tugs were sending waves, but I really think it's remarkable. Go ahead.
I've read recently about the number of cars that they could move by barge during this time period, and then after they built the Great Bridge, was anywhere between 5 and 10.
I wonder if it's double, if it's 10, or?
I think it's just a single.
Okay, so it's a
I think
much
it's
longer
single.
one, yeah,
Now,
really
a
long.
box car, the length at that time was probably maybe 35 feet long,
So it's short.
maybe 40 at the longest, but probably the smaller size.
Is-
That makes sense.
And today they're-
Today they're 50 and 60. Now we're talking
Right.
about box cars.
Mhm.
You know, other cars are longer.
Yes,
I'm confused as to which bridge this is. Is this the one that runs right by the Memphis, Arkansas, or is this the one at the Harris?
this is the one in the middle. This,
At
the
Harahan?
Harahan, yeah, the Harahan's on the outside. on the
Okay,
north
and
side.
then this
North
one,
side.
and then Memphis, Arkansas?
Yeah, Memphis, Arkansas is on the south
So
side.
it's like the third bridge from our I-40 bridge. It's the second.
Yeah,
It's the-
wait, it's the second one,
It's the
well, it's the
center.
one in the middle.
Yeah.
It's, and it's the oldest, and then you have the Harahan, maybe, what, 15 years later, or something like that?
But there's the new bridge, and then there's the Harahan, and then there's this little rail bridge, and then there's the Memphis, Arkansas.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Mhm. That-
It's
that's-
the second from the south, right? Okay, thanks.
And, well, what was, as I said, is, I'm sure if I looked hard enough, I would find out how they got the funding. I wonder if any of the movers and shakers in Memphis,
Congress authorized, now I don't know if they gave money, the building of a bridge in Memphis about 1885. And the first company flittered around, and then they came up with a second, which is a subsidiary of the Kansas City, Fort Scott, and Memphis. And I think whatever they call the bridge company, Memphis, Arkansas Bridge
it was
Company or something like
Kansas
that.
City, Memphis Bridge Company.
Okay, you know, the ones who actually built it was
Right.
a subsidiary. And frankly, I don't know where the money came from, but it was authorized, so I'm assuming there was some.
I think it was in the government interest
Yeah.
to a great deal, because it unified the country, basically, is what it did.
Sure, yeah.
And the reason nothing happened earlier in there, as you recall, this is kind of an interesting aside, with Memphis having all this stuff happen to it. After the Mexican War and acquisition of most of the Western Territory, southern Western Territory, like California and Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas was brought in earlier. But at that point, they decided to do Pacific Railroad surveys. The government authorized it. And it just so happened that the Secretary of War was Jefferson Davis, who kind of changed sides on the But they authorized 5 different routes, and the one at Memphis would have, there's no way it would not have been done, because it was straight, it would a little dip to the south, and avoided the Rockies altogether, going through southern Arizona, and would have been built for 1/10. What happened is that they, after the war, and in the well, obviously past the mid-60s, about 67 or 8, they decided to build the first transcontinental railroad, and they started from Minneapolis as far as they could get it from the south. And that was intentional, and because it was also the hardest route, one of the hardest. It was the second worst. And they had to build, I think, 1,000 tunnels. I mean, it was just crazy. So it was a really expensive thing, but they were determined, if the war had not happened, I guarantee you the first bridge would have been here.
Yeah, I agree.
And it would have, it would just been so simple to do, and it's right in the middle of the country. And it connects with northern Texas, with Dallas and Santa Fe and so on. And went to California, which was developed a long time before the northern Oregon.
This might have been Chicago, when Chicago might have been a smaller place.